Hey guys, today we are looking at types of leases, and we have 20 questions for our real estate exam. Once again, the subject is type of leases. So here's question number 1. What is a gross lease in real estate? A, the landlord pays all expenses. B, the tenant pays all expenses. C, both landlord and tenant share expenses. D, the lease is not binding. Answer A, the landlord pays all expenses. In a gross lease, the landlord is responsible for paying all the expenses associated with the property, including taxes, insurance, and maintenance. Which type of lease is commonly used in residential real estate? A, gross lease. B, net lease. C, percentage lease. D, ground lease. Gross lease. Gross leases are commonly used in residential real estate where tenants pay a fixed rent and the landlord covers all the property expenses. What is a percentage lease primarily used for? A, residential properties. B, retail properties. C, industrial properties. D, office spaces. B, retail properties. A percentage lease is commonly used in retail properties where the tenant pays a base rent plus a percentage of their gross sales. In a net lease, which expenses are typically paid by the tenant? A, property taxes and insurance. B, maintenance and repairs. C, utilities and landscaping. D, none of the above. Property taxes and insurance. In a net lease, the tenant is responsible for paying property taxes and insurance in addition to the base rent. What is a ground lease? A, a lease for agricultural land. A lease for land without any buildings. C, a lease for commercial properties. D, a lease for underground storage. B, a lease for land without any buildings. A ground lease typically involves leasing land without any buildings or improvements, and it is often used for long-term development purposes. Which type of lease allows the landlord to share a portion of the property's income with the tenant? A, gross lease. B, net lease. C, percentage lease. D, ground lease. C, percentage lease. In a percentage lease, the tenant's rent is based on a percentage of their gross sales, allowing the landlord to share in the tenant's income. In a triple net lease, which expenses are the tenant responsible for? A, property taxes, insurance, and maintenance. B, rent and utilities. C, property management fees. D, landscaping and parking lot repairs. A, property taxes, insurance, and maintenance. In a triple net lease, the tenant is responsible for paying property taxes, insurance, and maintenance expenses in addition to the base rent. What type of lease has a fixed rent that increases at specified intervals? A, step-up lease. B, index lease, C, graduated lease, D, flat lease. C, graduated lease. A graduated lease has a fixed rent that increases at specified intervals, providing gradual rent hikes over time. What is an index lease based on? A, tenant's income, B, inflation or economic indicators, C, property square footage, D, property's location. B, inflation or economic indicators. An index lease ties the rent to inflation or economic indicators, causing rent to adjust periodically. What type of lease is often used for agricultural purposes? A, gross lease, B, net lease, C, percentage lease, D, ground lease. D, ground lease. Ground leases are commonly used in agriculture for leasing farmland for cultivation. And by the way, guys, if you enjoy this type of content, give us a thumbs up and go ahead and subscribe to our channel so you can make sure you get all the questions you need to pass your real estate exam, and also hit the notification button so that you don't miss one of our videos. It's free, it's easy, it helps us in the algorithm, it helps us to get our content out there. So help us out today. Hit that like button, subscribe, and hit the notification button. Which lease type is most advantageous for a landlord in a commercial property? A, gross lease, B, net lease, C, percentage lease, D, ground lease. Net lease. Net leases are advantageous for landlords in commercial properties as they pass on many expenses to the tenant. In a step-up lease, how often does the rent increase? Annually, B, monthly, C, every 5 years, D, it remains fixed. Annually. Explanation. In a step-up lease, the rent increases at specified intervals, often on an annual basis. What is a lease option? A lease option. A lease with an option to buy the property. B, a lease that includes multiple renewal options. C, a lease for commercial properties. D, a lease with an option to sublease. A lease with an option to buy the property. A lease option allows the tenant the opportunity to purchase the property at a predetermined price during the lease term. What is a lease extension option? A, an option for the landlord to extend the lease. B, an option for the tenant to extend the lease. C, an option for the tenant to buy the property. D, an option for the tenant to sublet the property. B, an option for the tenant to extend the lease. A lease extension option allows the tenant to extend the lease beyond its initial term. Which lease type is often used in shopping malls where tenants pay a base rent plus a percentage of their sales? A, gross lease, B, net lease, C, percentage lease, D, ground lease. C, percentage lease. Percentage leases are commonly used in shopping malls, allowing landlords to share in tenant sales. In a modified gross lease, which expenses are typically shared between the landlord and tenant? A. Property taxes and insurance. B. Maintenance and repairs. C. Utilities and landscaping. D. None of the above. A. Property taxes and insurance. In a modified gross lease, the landlord and tenant typically share property taxes and insurance costs, while other expenses vary. What is a lease without a buyout? What is a lease with a buyout clause? A. A lease that cannot be terminated. B. A lease with an option to buy the property. C. A lease that requires the tenant to pay the entire lease term up front. D. A lease with a penalty for early termination. D. A lease with a penalty for early termination. A lease with a buyout clause allows the tenant to terminate the lease early, typically by paying a penalty. In a short-term lease, how long is the typical lease term? A. 3 to 5 years. B. 1 to 2 years. C. 10 to 15 years. D. 20 years or more. B. 1 to 2 years. Short-term leases have lease terms typically ranging from 1 to 2 years. What type of lease is most common in commercial office spaces? A. Gross lease. B. Net lease. C. Percentage lease. D. Ground lease. B. Net lease. Net leases are frequently used in commercial office spaces where tenants typically pay a portion of expenses. Which lease type is most favorable for a tenant looking to control operating expenses? A. Gross lease. B. Net lease. C. Percentage lease. D. Ground lease. A. Gross lease. A gross lease is advantageous for tenants looking to control operating expenses because they pay a fixed rent and the landlord covers the property expenses. So that's it. Those are the 20 questions on types of leases. I hope you enjoyed it. Once again, subscribe to our channel, hit the notification button, and give us a likes up. And if you have any questions, ask them in the comments below. We'll be glad to get back with you and try to answer those questions. Thank you again. Have a great day.